We're so grateful to have David here and his institutional expertise with us and to help any or all families here. So thank you, David, so much for being here. Okay. And our goal for this evening is really to obviously provide just general financial aid information. I built questions for discussion based off of your RSVP responses, and so our goal is obviously to answer any questions you may have. We really want to tackle on any institutional financial aid questions, admissions and scholarships, and also any family financial planning advice that we can provide as well. So I believe parents are always asking the same thing, not only can we get into a certain college, but can we also afford it? In this day and age, it's getting to that point. So I know you all have lots of questions. You're coming in with questions. Again, we'll try to answer as many possible. But thank you all for being here. I think we can go ahead and start it. I'll actually take a seat here so we can pass the microphone back and forth. Okay. So David, just starting off with the basics, where should families begin when planning for college financial aid, and how early should they start in their high school journey?
Thank you. I'm excited to be here and glad that you're starting this journey. How many freshmen or first-year parents do we have? Sophomore? Junior? Okay, almost all juniors. Great. So you're kind of at the ideal spot in your junior year. There's a couple of things that you want to get started now. One is your student's responsibility, a scholarship search. So one thing that you'll find out as you go through the financial aid process is that the overarching philosophy of the federal government and most institutions is that it is the parent's primary responsibility to pay for the student. And so even though there's a FAFSA form, there's institutional applications, there's the profile form, those are tools to give us information to figure out how much money we have available for you, how much you're eligible for. But you always want to make sure you're supplementing that with a variety of other things. So really start to look at how much can we afford for a monthly payment? Do we have 529 plans set aside? Most universities are going to have a payment plan of some sort. And so if you have that payment plan, it's just like taking on a car payment. How much can you afford in that monthly payment? Give your students goals of when they're looking at scholarship searches of, if you're looking at a private school, we want you to be able to raise, $8,000 in scholarships per year. And unfortunately, the scholarship search process, in the junior year, you're not really applying for the scholarship so much as kind of getting your game plan. And you're figuring out what scholarship should I apply, what are the deadlines. It's all pretty much the same calendar every year. So if there's a scholarship that has a May 1st deadline, it's going to have a May 1st deadline every year. What of those are renewable? And can I opt for renewal? Can I apply again for that scholarship? So that you don't find yourself in a position in that first year of, great, we managed to secure $5,000 in private scholarships, but it's one time. Because the school's not going to make up the difference, the federal government's not going to make up the difference in those subsequent years. So your students want to start that process of finding those scholarships. I'm assuming there's a school bulletin or a system they can log into here. There's online resources. I never advocate that your students or your family should be paying for scholarship searches. There's tons of free resources out there. You could just Google. And I always say start broad. What's the general category of what their major might be. So don't start immediately with journalism, but maybe journalism is in the humanities. So let's start a little bit higher level than just specifically journalism. Because also their major could change by the time they actually apply to college. Also look, for parents, look at employer benefits and see if your employers offer any kind of tuition reimbursement plans, any kind of scholarship programs for dependents. I always suggest that you don't talk to your supervisor, but that you talk to human resources. Your supervisor, if they don't have a student that's ever gone through it, probably not going to know. Human resources or your benefits coordinators will always know if there's a scholarship program. Okay? Look and see, if you have a 529 plan, where are you set at? Comfortably, how much can you withdraw from that each year? you kind of want to get a game plan of what can we actually afford. The second step to that you can start doing now, and just know that the information will be a little bit out of date, is every college website will have a net cost calculator on it. And you can go to that cost calculator, put in some basic information about your student, and it will tell you if they were enrolled right now, approximately what their financial aid package would look like and what your net cost after financial aid would be. It's not always going to be accurate. It's based on the goals from the university for that year. Goals may change in 2 years for the university, who they're trying to attract, who they're trying to enroll. Priorities may shift with the university, but a good place to start. You can also go to College Scorecard, which is through the federal government. It's standardized questions and information that they've taken from the universities, and they put it together in a format that you can compare and contrast different universities. So it looks definitely at cost, but it's going to look at things like graduation rate, median income after graduation. So some really important factors that your student may be looking at this great school, and then you start to look at kind of the facts and figures of the school and compare them to the exact same stats from other universities and realize, well, maybe this one has a 40% graduation rate, which isn't great, but over here they have an 80% graduation rate and very similar programs. So let's look more at this program than this 40%. And always, if you see something interesting or that you don't quite understand about what's on their college scorecard, always talk to the admission office. They'll be able to let you know what that may mean and what the real world implications of that particular data point is.
Regarding the FAFSA specifically, I know a lot of families are concerned about whether their income may be too high to receive federal financial aid. Is there ever a reason not to file the FAFSA, or are you always recommending it?
I always recommend you fill out the FAFSA. I just got back from Washington, D.C. this week, meeting with the Department of Education and financial aid folks from across the country. We are down to truly a 15-minute FAFSA. So we're at this point right now, it takes 15 minutes, caveat, per person to fill out the FAFSA. So typically when you fill out the FAFSA, you have the student who starts it, so it's going to take them about 15 minutes to do, and then they have to invite a parent as a contributor, and it'll take them about 15 minutes to do. But it truly is, most of the complex questions or answers to the questions from tax returns, for example, we all kind of freeze up when we're talking about tax returns and money. That is downloaded automatically from the IRS. So you don't have to know what your adjusted gross income is. You don't have to know what your tax liability was. It's going to come in automatically through the IRS. Good idea to know what those numbers are so you can look at them and say, yes, everything came over correctly. But once it's in, it's on your FAFSA. There's no need to check it or change it. Schools will help you if there's corrections that need to be made. But 15 minutes of your day to see how much money you might get from the federal government, the state government, and the universities, I would say it's worth it. I also use the analogy of, don't WebMD yourself on financial aid. Let the professionals diagnose you and figure out what's wrong and how we can help, versus relying on Google and saying, no, I just can't do it. I know we're not going to qualify.
Thank you. As far as the FAFSA itself, what are some deadlines to be aware of?
The FAFSA will open up every year no later than October 1st. How many of you have students who are currently enrolled in college? No, perfect. So you don't know there were huge issues last year and the year before. Ignore that. The FAFSA will open up by law October 1st of every year, and that's the October 1st before the September that they're starting school. So for a senior, it's going to be the October 1st of their senior year is when they're going to be able to fill out the FAFSA. That's the biggest deadline to remember, is that's the opening date. For the state of California, you want to make sure that the FAFSA is in, and I'm assuming electronic submission of grades for Calgary.
Right, yes.
So that's being taken care of for you, but FAFSA needs to be in by March 2nd. And then every university may have a priority deadline. So you want to make sure you're looking at those universities, what their priority deadline is. I will say for the most part, schools in California are going to apply, we're going to look at that March 2nd deadline, just like the state of California. At Chapman, for example, we use the term priority deadline. And all that means is that's when we want you to get it in so that when you are accepted to the university, we can have your financial aid package out to you within a couple of days versus waiting for you to be accepted and then getting that FAFSA in. There's no penalty for us if you're after that deadline. Most universities in that first year will have that penalty attached if you're missing a deadline, but you do want to make sure that you're getting as close to that deadline as possible. And if for some reason you can't meet that deadline, check in with the school's financial aid office or admission office and let them know what's going on. Occasionally a FAFSA does get stuck in processing, and it takes a little bit of manipulation from the federal government to get that out of processing. Just let the offices know what's going on and they'll guide you through what process they have. The other component of that is the CSS profile, which is a private application that some schools utilize. Each school can set its own deadline and how they use that information. Also opens up as early as October 1, and so you want to make sure if the school requires the CSS profile that you're utilizing that deadline as well.
So we know the FAFSA opens up opportunities for federal aid, you mentioned grants, and scholarships as well. So on that note, what are the realistic chances of receiving substantial scholarships not tied to grades or athletics necessarily?
Sure. With the FAFSA, you're not submitting grades, you're not submitting athletic participation. It's strictly looking at your financial situation and saying from the federal government, this is what's available. And then the schools will utilize that information to determine what's available at the school level as well. The state uses that information as well. So with the federal government, the grant programs are extremely limited. So grants are typically reserved for the highest need students. Maximum grant that the federal government has is about $7,400 for the year. And it's anywhere from $740 to $7,400 if you qualify. From the state of California, if you're looking at a private school, it's about $9,300. At a Cal State or a UC, it's going to cover most of tuition fees at those programs through the state of California. So those programs are out there. The FAFSA itself is about 30 questions, plus some kind of derivative questions after those. Each one of those questions determines eligibility. So there's not really a spot where I can say, if you make $300,000, you don't qualify. Because you could make $300,000 and have a family of 8 versus making $50,000 with a family of 2. Those are very different scenarios, and eligibility is going to look very different. Just the adjusted gross income isn't enough to let us know, yes, you should apply, or no, you shouldn't. If you come to me and say, I make $5 million a year, should I apply, should I fill out the FAFSA? Again, I would say it takes 15 minutes, but you're probably not going to receive anything other than student loan consideration at that point. On the state side, every year the state of California publishes income and asset guidelines, and if your students meet a grade point average of 3.0 and above, there's some categories of how that's calculated and certain income restrictions, then they automatically receive that Cal Grant aid, which is the full tuition, Cal State's UCs, about $9,300, $9,400 at private schools. So you should definitely, every year those are posted on the California Student Aid Commission website. Any school will be happy to give those to you when they're published. And it's based on family size and then assets.
Awesome. Thank you. You did answer my next question regarding the income limits with scholarships. Now that I have scholarships, so I'll move forward with, do students need to maintain a certain GPA to keep their scholarships every year as they're going through college? What happens if grades dip slightly?
Yes. So the easy answer is yes. By law, we are required to have a minimum satisfactory academic progress standard. And so that's a level that we set that says every student to make satisfactory academic progress towards their degree in 4 years, or the program length, has to maintain these standards. Typically, you're going to see something like a 2.0 to a 2.5, somewhere in there, and that's the minimum for federal and state financial aid consideration. If your student's receiving an academic merit scholarship or an athletic scholarship, there may be other grade attachments to that. So for example, at Chapman, even though we have an overall SAP standard, satisfactory academic progress standard of 2.0, we have for students who are receiving merit scholarships, so they're receiving money based on their academic merit, they have a higher grade point average that they have to maintain, 2.75. Every school will treat the grade point average a little bit differently, and if you drop below that, each school will have their own process for what happens. So at some universities, when you drop below, you may lose institutional aid eligibility, but you might still have federal aid eligibility and state aid eligibility. Or you may have to appeal and let us know, why did you drop below this? What's the plan to get you back on track? It'll go to an appeals committee. The committee will review it and say, we don't think you can get back on track based on this, so we're not reinstating your eligibility. If you enroll, you're enrolling by paying tuition out of pocket. Typically what I will say, at least at the private schools, we tend to be a little more generous, and so we know that that first year it can be an adjustment, and we're a little more lenient with granting appeals for students who don't quite make the grade point average that they need. I can't guarantee that, but it also based on the student's individual circumstances. What I will say is when there becomes a pattern, so for example, if the first appeal for dropping below the standards is, well, I was having problems adjusting, learning how to study for college, and then they drop below again, and they're using the same, well, I haven't quite gotten my study rhythm, we're gonna look at that and say, now you've had a year and a half to figure that out. How come we haven't figured that out yet? So maybe we're not gonna do that. Once you bring your grades back up, then we're gonna consider you for eligibility again at that point.
In terms of locating outside scholarships, what strategies do you recommend for families? I would like to mention briefly, we do have a modern day scholarship website that's available on our website. So that's something that we've put together, available to anyone to access it. And those include any local community scholarships as well as any nationwide scholarships as well. So again, we do have available to our modern day families. But again, what do you recommend for families to best locate these outside scholarships?
Google is the best at this point. There are databases that you can access. FastAid and FastWeb are great. I think one of them is still working, one of them may not be. If you want to pay a little bit, there's Scholly, which is an app that you can download. Everything on Scholly, you're paying like a $30 or $40 subscription for the year. Everything on Scholly is available free. You just need to use Google and other resources and things like that, and you'll find them. I always recommend to families as well that, when you're looking at scholarships and scholarship searches, there's going to be kind of the small grabs, the $500, the $1,000 scholarship, and then there's the big grabs, the $10,000, $5,000, $6,000 scholarships. Think about the logistics of that. If you had to choose between two scholarships to apply for, and you could only apply for one of them, which one are you going to apply for? The bigger one, right? Which means everyone has that same philosophy. So make sure you apply for both, because I see more students get a lot of money from $500, $1,000 scholarships than one big scholarship that comes in for $5,000 or $6,000. So really look at both of those opportunities, the big money grabs and the small money grabs.
So, go ahead.
I'm asking the college funding coach. When it comes to my 2 cents on the scholarships is this. When you see the scholarships out there, there's plenty of them. What attracts people most are the largest value. And having helped a lot of folks, I would say that go for the ones that are smaller in number because there's not as much competition for those. And there's nothing wrong, absolutely, by applying for both. But the reality is, experience tells us the smaller ones in numbers count the most. But you got to start early because a lot of them are like, I have to write an essay. None of them are extremely difficult. I think people will pass them by. They'll say, well, that's only like $500, but that's $500. You got to just look at that. If I did 10 of them, that's $5,000, right? So that's how I look at it. And this application you talked about, just put apps on your phone nowadays and make it super easy. But I'd say like have a strategy for scholarships. It does take time, but it's well worth it. And there's leads to other conversations around financial aid, appeals, and all that good stuff. But at least for the scholarships, I would say have a strategy for that.
Thank you, Lance, and thank you for joining us. Just really briefly before we move on, I do want to say a couple. So you are from College Funding Coach?
Right, it's collegefundingcoach.org. So it's a national organization. You can see it on, just Google it. And do seminars virtually and in person all through the country. So I'm a certified coach for that. And our seminars don't cost anything at all, right? But lots of packed information there. So college is a business for sure, and you gotta know the rules of the game.
So thank you so much again. So moving on to our next section, I do want to talk about, you did mention 529 plans and loans. What are the implications of using a 529 plan? Does it affect any aid eligibility?
So your 529 plan gets reported on your FAFSA as an asset. But the thing to remember is it's a diminishing asset. So you're using it, as you're using it, it goes down, right? We're not saying on the FAFSA form, if you had $20,000 in your 529 plan, you're expected to use $20,000 in that first year and wipe it out. We're not. You may choose to do that, and that's a valid strategy, and the next year you report on the FAFSA that you don't have anything in that plan. That's totally fine. But as you utilize that money, the expectation is you're saving for college, we want you to use it for college, right? That's going to go down. So each year you're going to have less and less in that account that you're reporting. So using the plan itself doesn't have implications for, it's not going to affect your financial aid other than you're reporting something less as an asset each year.
So, just comment on that, great. The 529s, they've expanded what they can cover now. So nowadays, it covers elementary, private school, to trade schools, very, very flexible, except that the 529, getting money out of the 529, they add to that, they recognize that there was an issue there. If you use it for qualified higher education or education now, that is tax-free. But now you can convert it when they go to retire one day into a Roth up to $35,000, and it's to get up to the limit each year that you can contribute. So and it has to be in there for 10 plus years. So it has a Roth ability, but it's weak. But the 529s are very flexible, and in California, there's no state favored plan, and that means that you don't have a state tax deduction, which is actually, in a way, a good thing, because it allows you, as a parity state, to use any 529 out there. And so you can just Google or go to collegefundingcoach.org, 529 calculators, and shop plans. So different costs, different carriers for that.
Thank you. Moving on to loans specifically. I know there's been recent changes with, like, say, Parent Plus loans. What should parents understand about federal student loans overall, and also the Parent Plus loans?
Sure. I think the most important thing to know right now about plus loans as you're getting ready to look at the possibility of a plus loan. The interest rate is high. I think we're pushing 9% right now. There's an origination fee. We're hopeful, and we're hearing rumblings that origination fee might be going away, but that's the fee that they charge you to take out the loan. Under the new plus loan plan, someone wasn't quite good with math. Per student, you can borrow a maximum of $20,000 per year. But you have a maximum lifetime limit for the student of $65,000. So somewhere in Congress, someone didn't quite math the math, because that doesn't add up. For a 4-year program, you need $80,000 if you're going to borrow that max. So be aware that as you're doing your planning, you don't necessarily want to default to that $20,000 in the plus loan program. If you're going to stick strictly with the federal program, divide it out over to the 4, so you're looking at that 16.5 or whatever it comes out to be versus the 20. You may want to look at, if you have good credit, you may want to look at private loan options. A private loan option is more of a viable option now, especially with the limitations that are put on a plus loan, because these are loans through private lenders that will say, okay, we can, instead of that $20,000 limit, we can go up to the cost of education, so we can fill in that entire gap for you. Interest rates are typically lower. You have more of an ability to compare and contrast. So for example, on our website, we have a tool that you can put in basic information about your student and compare 3 or 4 different loans and what it might look like for them. Right now, a majority of those private loans are focused on a student as borrower with a parent as cosigner. We're seeing a bigger shift in that to anyone being able to borrow on behalf of the student without having the student sign up on it. So it's typically one borrower, and if that borrower needs a cosigner to boost their credit or to boost the options that they may have, they'll walk you through that process. The other thing to kind of say about that, if you're going into that private loan route, you typically want to stick with one lender. So you're not jumping around from like Sally to SoFi to another lender, because all of them are going to have different terms and conditions and different minimum payments that have to be made. And so your minimum payment is going to be calculated off your total amount. And so if you have a minimum payment required by the lender of maybe it's $100 for the loan, regardless of the amount, and then 1% above that, if you have 3 separate loans, then all of a sudden it's 100 here, 100 here, 100 here, versus over here it might have just been 150 as your minimum payment. The loans, the plus loan, the standard repayment is 10 years. Private loans, standard is 10. They're typically looking at 15 to 20 is how you can drag that out, depending on how much you borrow. Same with the plus loan, the extended repayments are.
Yeah, I would echo on that. I would say if you have good credit, definitely explore, right, what you can qualify for, because not all loans have origination fees. So it makes sense to look at that. And the other question is, maybe you say to yourself, well, I don't need a loan. Well, if you take a look at the interest rate, some people will say, well, I'll take money out of my Roth or whatever that is. And not necessarily right or wrong about that, depending on your situation, but it's the arbitrage game. It's like, well, if my portfolio is doing 12% and the loan is 7%, 8%, maybe I should look at that, especially if there's no origination fee. Something to think about. And again, same thing with the websites. They have no skin in the game. They just talk about, here's some lenders that you might want to consider, and you can just explore that way. And they're all, for sure, happy to talk to you.
Thank you. And Lance, I'll start with you. Ending on this segment for 529 plans.
Yeah.
What are the biggest risks that families should consider before taking on these parent loans?
Relative to 529 versus parent loans?
Just loans in general, but if you'd like to.
Yeah, I mean, 529s are great if you calculate the amount that you need and you use it. Not so great if you don't. Loans, again, that arbitrage opportunity is out there. Everybody's situation, I guess I would say, is unique, each family, right? So it's looking at the full financial picture. The question really becomes, ask yourself this one, what if I have the perfect storm? So the scenario is set up, you tell your kids, hey, you study hard, you get great grades, you go to modern day, and you do all these great things, you get accepted to a great school. Let's take a look at the example for Harvard, right? And Harvard arguably has the largest endowment out there. They could literally pay for all of your kids' college education in perpetuity, no problem, but they don't. Why? Because of business, and they can make money. You want that Harvard, label, then you're going to pay for it, right? So, when you think about, how do I afford to send maybe, what if they studied and they got accepted, but I had more than one kid. I had 3 kids. They all got accepted. I guess the question is, how does that impact your retirement? Right. So it's a unique situation for everybody. It's that delicate balance, though, is how do we come up with a plan that I don't sacrifice my retirement, yet I can send my kids to college. And there are definitely ways to do it. There's proprietary softwares that take a look at endowment size versus grant size, average award sizes, appeals and processes, different strategies, Roth, 529s, all these different strategies, but all you need to your particular situation. So certainly the loans, 529s are great tools, just a question of what combination or what assets make the most sense.
And David, again, same question, what are the biggest risks families should consider?
I think the biggest risk when you're looking at loans and whether you're going to take them out is this the right financial decision for the family? One of the things that I talk about with my team in my office is that we have an amazing admission team. And their job is to make sure that the university is a social and academic fit for the student. And my team's responsibility is to make sure it's a financial fit for the family. And sometimes those aren't going hand in hand. And it's very hard sometimes because maybe this is the dream school and we want to do everything we can. But if you have multiple students, you're going to have the same, you're going to have 3 dream schools at some point, right? And if the dream school is causing you the anxiety of, am I going to be able to retire? For the next 20 years, I'm going to have a, $500, $1,000, $1,500 loan payment. Is that feasible for the family? And that may be some of those difficult conversations that you have with your students of, here's, what I said in the beginning, here's what the plan is, here's what we have saved, here's what we can afford. And we're looking at schools now where maybe we could afford $1,000 a month, but we're looking at schools where we're going to have to be able to afford $2,500 a month. Are those a reality for you? If you're close to retirement, does that mean you need to keep working for a little bit longer just to make sure you get through that time frame? You really want to make sure that you're not just looking at the 1-year mark. We got in, we're excited, you get the confetti, you get the gifts from the universities and everything's excited, you go to the preview days and talk to professors and meet people and everything's exciting. Great, we can do that commitment deposit, we've made it for the year, but you really need to remember that that's a 4-year commitment that you're making. And can you do that for 4 years? Whatever you're going to be paying, if you're doing it out of pocket on a payment plan, we're going to be doing that for 4 years. Tuition across the board, nationwide, on average, increases about 3.5% to 3.6% each year. So it's not necessarily just the, here we are now, what if tuition increased 5% every year for the next 4 years? Can we still maintain this? So that's really kind of the pitfall of, don't make the 1-year decision, make the 4-year decision and plan that out.
Now, when it comes to schools and two, so when you fill out your FAFSA in some other schools, some of the, maybe the Ivies and that, private schools are going to request what they call a CSS profile, but each profile determines your financial aid, what they think that you should pay, and what their tuition is. And then what they have is this called percent of need. What is that? So each school will publish publicly the percent of need-based financial aid that you get. So simply that so when you fill out your FAFSA, well, you're eligible for a certain amount of financial aid. It doesn't mean that you're going to get it. It just means you're eligible for it. The schools will then publish, we meet 100% of eligible need, or we meet 50%, which obviously is a big deal. Point there is, if there's not a particular school that you have in mind, just happen to pop this one, like, hey, I just thought we went here, this is a good school, it seems to be ranked pretty well for this particular major. If you shop around and you can, there's a free college money report on collegefundingcoach.org, not to keep plugging it, but it's free. And it will tell you, you search up to 3 schools at a time, it'll tell you what percent of need that those colleges meet. So there may be a school that's not on your radar that, wow, these people meet 100% of need, these people meet 50% of need. I never really thought about that school. As I researched, it meets all my needs, it's got a great rating, it just wasn't on my radar. So I would say take a look at that as well, if you qualify for financial aid. If you don't, other strategies are out there as well.
And on that note, I do want to go back to the income and eligibility questions. I know you guys both touched on it, but what types of aid are still available to high-income families? A lot of our families obviously are concerned with having multiple students, not only like currently attending high school, but attending a private Catholic school, right? So what types of aid are still available to those families?
Well, let's look at the private high school tuition first. I think that's kind of an easier thing. I think we're going to talk a little bit later on about special circumstances and things like that. That's what we would call a special circumstance. Every school is going to look at that a little bit differently. Schools that use the profile, that's going to be built into the CSS profile. It's going to be part of the questions that are in there. Schools that don't, you may have to write an appeal letter or a special circumstances letter where you let us know. Every school will review that, but every school may be something a little bit different. So some schools may look at that and say, well, that's a choice that you're making to send your student to a private school. That's great, that means you can afford to send them to a private school. Now your tuition moves over to the university level as well. Some schools may give you some consideration for you're having an ongoing expense for younger siblings. That's great. So each school's going to treat that a little bit differently. Each school's going to have a little bit of a different process. Typically on the websites, you're going to want to look for like, appeal or special circumstances are typically the search terms on the financial aid website that will walk you through what's going to be needed. Typically, we're going to want to see documentation, and this could apply to a number of things. It could apply to extraordinary medical bills, loss of job, change in job where your income is going to be shifting, things like that. That's all going to be covered under an appeal or special circumstances. For high-income families, when you get that FAFSA back, you get your FAFSA results back, you're going to see on there what's called an SAI, or a Student Aid Index number. And that's the number that the federal government uses to determine if you qualify for the Pell Grant. State government's going to look at it in conjunction with all of your income information for Pell Grant consideration. Schools are going to use that to determine what your financial need is. If you're seeing, a six-figure SAI, so something over, 100,000 or over, your options for need-based financial aid are going to be significantly limited. So at that point, your students are really looking for merit-based opportunities, something that they do well, whether it's their academics, whether it's talent-based, athletic-based. That's really what financial aid is going to be out there for them in addition to student loans. Depending on the cost of the school, you may have an SAI that's in the, let's say, 70 range, 70,000. But if you're looking at private schools tuition may be 70,000, but our cost of education, which encompasses housing, meal plans, transportation, things like that, may be well over 100, so you still have need in there. If you had a 70,000 SAI and you're looking at a Cal State, that's significantly high for a Cal State. So you're probably not going to have need-based eligibility in there, versus at a Chapman, you are going to have need-based eligibility because our cost of education is higher than that SAI number.
So, do you have any military families? Okay. The loans are always, again, no matter who you are, you can qualify for that. And something to consider. The merit-based, their schools actually will publish. This is the unweighted GPA, this is the SAT score that we're looking for. And so that becomes important because let's say your SAT score is just below, you can take it again, right? So understanding what that merit-based scholarship, what are those metrics, is different for each school. They do publish it though. And that's important if people qualify. And there are stories where people did retake it and qualify. So that's pretty cool once you understand what is that merit-based scholarship program. So that's, again, public data, and you can find that on the website.
And then changing gears a little bit.
Oh, one more thing.
Go ahead.
Any business owners? Perfect. So here's the thing. So now they have where employers can reimburse for student loans, but you have to have a student loan for that to happen. So if your kid starts to work for a company that does have that cafeteria plan, that ability to pay off those loans, that's something to think about. And then, you got to be careful because assets in your kid's name really count a lot more against you for financial aid. But if you're not qualifying for financial aid, you can pay your kid as maybe filing or doing whatever they're doing and create some business expenses that way. So that's something to think about as well.
The caveat that I'll add to that is that then becomes employment funds from the student. So the student does have to report that as income.
Yeah, up to a certain point. So you're not going to pay them. I mean, yeah.
On the FAFSA, regardless of the taxes, you still have to pay it. You still have to report it.
And again, changing gears a little bit, Lance, I'll start with you.
Sure.
Beyond academics, what strengthens the student's financial aid profile?
Well, I mean, getting accepted is one thing, the financial aid profiles. So just know this, that the FAFSA is different than the CSS profile. The CSS profile is different for different schools. They're going to ask for more, typically more information. But the good news with the CSS profile, there's more scholarships available typically. So you might think a school is out of range, but because it's a private school, but they have an endowment and they're more generous, they just need to know a little bit more about you. A lot of people are hesitant, right? They're saying, I don't want to give out that information. I would say always fill out the FAFSA, always fill out the CS profile, because you can't qualify for a loan, at least if for financial aid wise, if you don't fill out the FAFSA, the CSS profile. Now, there's another, let's say all things are being equal, and you're the college, put yourself in the college's shoes. Now I understand a little bit about you because you fill out the CSS profile. Everything's equal, except in one scenario, I'm writing a check to the student. In the other scenario, you're writing a large check to the institution. Who wins? It's a business. So the CSS profile is something you do want to do, for sure.
And that would be if the school utilizes the profile.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a generic application like the FAFSA.
That's right.
Each school has to sign up to use it. And typically you're only doing it in your first year of study. Schools typically don't have you do it every year because you do have to pay for the profile.
What assets are required to be reported on the FAFSA?
So there's a lot of confusion around that. I'd say the number one mistake that people make is they put their 401k on there. You don't do that. That's not what they're asking for. It's assets that they feel you have a choice for. So ironically, though, IRAs, they'll say put that on because they feel like you have a choice whether you want to put that into an IRA or you want to put it into college, but not your employer. So you can just Google. You can also go, again, to the website, but it'll tell you exactly what's on there. But it's probably the biggest mistake that I see. And remember, FAFSA has a prior year. And if you have a change in income, the only thing you can do is go to the appeals office. So they're looking for 2 years earlier. 2 years earlier, I was working at this fantastic job. The downside's outside of my control, and all of a sudden I have to still report those numbers. Those are going to be in appeal, but that's the number one mistake that people will make for sure. But they're pretty clear on the assets that you have to report. Yeah, there are some recent changes, like farmland and how it gets a little technical. But certainly easy once you see the list. But they just made some recent changes that I think are a benefit. But one change is not so good. Don't shoot the messenger. But it used to be, if I had multiple kids in school at the same time, then I could spread out that how much need I need. Now it's like they don't care. It's just like you have to pay for each one what that SII is. So
I think the easiest way on assets on the FAFSA, the three basic things that get excluded: small business, primary residence, and retirement. Everything else is reported on some level in there. So if you have something and you're thinking, not sure if this gets reported or not, most likely it does. The help questions on the FAFSA, when you're filling it out, you click the little question mark and it tells you exactly like what funds fall under investments, what falls under cash savings checking.
one of the things that was, oh, go
Can
ahead.
you just repeat that three things that you said?
The three things that are excluded, the basic things,
Yeah.
small business, primary residence, and retirement.
One of the things, questions I get asked pretty frequently, when it comes to divorce, who's considered the providing financial aid? Is the person that they're living with? No, the answer today, is the new rules, is who provides the most financial support. So that's certainly something to consider if you're a divorced parent.
And that does default to, if child support's being paid, is that child support more than 50% of the student's financial support? Then it's the person paying the child support, it's the parent of record. And the federal government has told us, as financial aid counselors, if there's a question about who provides the most financial support, this is why I always tell families, make the determination yourself, don't come in and ask me. The default is the parent who makes the most money. So I would leave that to your determination to figure out who provides the most financial support.
It gets kind of complex, but once you're sitting down, it's easy to go through. Yeah.
So we are down to about our last 10 to 15 minutes. I do want to open it up to any live questions, any special situations that you may still have questions about for our last 10 minutes, and then we'll wrap up after that. So again, I'm opening it up to whoever has any questions. We're happy to answer.
So I know that different colleges have different costs, and they all have the calculator, but do they all use the same algorithm to calculate what your costs will be for their particular school? Or is it just different based on?
Yeah, it's going to be different because that cost calculator, especially at private universities, like I said a little bit earlier, priorities change from year to year, and who we're trying to attract and who we're trying to recruit change from year to year. So each school is going to have kind of different priorities. So if it's calculating, like for example, a merit scholarship, those thresholds may change every year. And the grade point average Chapman's using is going to be different than the grade point average that Cal Lutheran might be using. So each calculator is going to be a little bit different. The best place to kind of compare, apples to apples across the board is going to be that college scorecard, because they do take our national reporting, take that information and condense it into kind of easy to read charts for you. So you can see kind of average financial aid package, average loan indebtedness, things like that. And it's calculated exactly the same way at each school at that point.
You had mentioned that October 1st of the senior year, you fill out the FAFSA form.
Yeah.
But say we're curious now, there's a simulator for it, or we?
No, you could absolutely fill out the FAFSA and just not send it to a university.
And it'll give us some idea.
Yeah, it's a free form. Like I said, it takes 15 minutes. Student starts it, parent gets the invitation. You go through, fill it out, download your tax information. Yeah, it'll give you a good idea.
Yeah, there's also SAI calculators. Same thing. They'll just tell you what you qualify for.
I will say the nice thing, if you decide to do the FAFSA this year, the federal government has made a recent announcement that your renewal FAFSAs, so because you're going to fill out that FAFSA every year, the renewal process starting next year is basically you log in and say, yes, everything's the same, and it just sends it.
Nice.
So you can kind of start it now and then just know that you're going to have to go in and log in, and both you and your student are going to have to affirm that everything's the same and make any kind of small adjustments to assets, but it'll give you a good idea.
With the CSS profile, is that, because only certain schools use that, is that still part of like the government site, or do you need to go per school and
Per school.
complete it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I think it's like $25 for the first school, and then like 16 or 17 for every school after that.
Not bad.
It cannot be used for federal financial aid consideration, only the FAFSA can. So it's going to be used for those institutional scholarships and eligibility.
Okay.
The profile, so different from the FAFSA where we're looking at the parent who provides the most support, the profile, depending on the school's preference, may actually ask for both families if the parents are divorced and their spouses as well. So the non-custodial parent, basically they're looking for a more complete financial picture. They're going to ask for things like the small business value, the primary residence value, all of those other things that are in there, your retirement values as well.
So if you're applying for the FAFSA in October 2026, is it looking for a tax return from 2024 or 2025? So, because you would have just filed April of 2026 for 2025, so would it be?
So students who are filling out their FAFSA now for next year are submitting their 24 taxes.
Okay.
Prior.
Okay, so prior year, okay.
So you reapply for the FAFSA every year.
Correct.
What about the scholarship? You have to do that every year. Is that?
It's going to depend on what scholarships your student receives. So some scholarships may just be a one and done, that's what they get. Others may have a simple renewal form where they just need to submit their grades to the foundation and the foundation says, perfect, let's renew it. Typically, the things at the university level are going to be fill out the FAFSA as long as everything stays the same. If it's a need-based scholarship, as long as everything stays the same, and your grades have been maintained, then those things are going to renew. But be aware that what you're offered in your first year is those need-based grants are going to fluctuate based on changes in your income and assets. So if let's say you're doing the FAFSA now, your 24 taxes show a much lower income, but you've gotten 2 or 3 significant raises in the meantime, you're not required to report that out on the FAFSA. You're only required to report exactly what they ask. But what that may mean is in 2 years, when that starts to show up on the FAFSA, then you might see some changes in those need-based grants.
Then when it comes to scholarships, always have a backup plan. Full ride scholarships are a lot less than you think. Let's say you're an athlete too, and you get an athletic scholarship, you get a D1 school, fantastic, right? But if you get injured, what happens? Right? So you can't control that. So always have that backup plan, but it's a very low % for full ride scholarships as well. And again, coming back to sports, those scholarship money are divided between all of the athletes. So always have that backup plan.
Sorry. So
Great question.
if you're applying, let's say your student's applying for like the non-binding early admission, how soon, if they get into that school, how soon after that can they expect like a financial aid package? And what do those deadlines look like in terms of saying, yes, I'm coming here versus,
So I can use Chapman as an example. Our students in the early action program, which is the non-binding, they received their admission decision in, I think, the second week of December. They got their financial aid package the first week of January. And strictly because we closed down for a week and a half. So we just didn't have time to get everyone's out. Early decision students got their financial aid packages within a day of their admission decision. And then when you push out, when's the deposit due, when's all of that, it's going to vary from school to school. I believe with our early action, we maintain the May 1 deadline.
On the flip side of that, if you do a early decision and you get a financial package, but it's not enough to cover the expenses, what are the options, both on the financial aid side as well as on the admission side? Can you then back out of that early decision, or?
On early decision, you've made a commitment to the university.
Okay.
If it's something purely financial, you would want to talk to the admission office about can you back out of that. The result of that may mean that they rescind the admission offer, so that not necessarily that you just fall into the regular decision pool, but they just go ahead and say, okay, we're going to go ahead and rescind that admission. Or they may say that we will consider you in part of the regular decision pool, but we're going to consider you now against all of the regular decision students and not just the early decision students. So that's a very real possibility.
And when you do get an award letter in that financial aid, again, public data, you can see what a typical award letter looks like. And if you're going to appeal, you can always have a chance to appeal, which I would say best to have the kid write the letter, financial aid office, but have a compelling reason why. It can be emotional as all can be, but it has to be a compelling reason why. But there's that, right? If you have multiple schools that are saying, hey, we want you to join us, that's not necessarily a great reason to appeal, to say, here's the offer letter from the other person. That's probably not going to rub them a little bit wrong, typically. Some people do that, but really more of a compelling reason. But, as you look at the award letter too, sometimes it's a little, in the moment you get caught up, like, this is an award letter. You look at it, and it's like part of it's a scholarship, part of it's a loan. You got to read it. So you're just looking at that, and then knowing what is normal. We don't, as a parent, this is not your business, right? You're fantastic at what you do, but you're not an expert in award letters, so you don't know what's normal. But again, there's software out there, there's counselors out there that can tell you, well, this school typically awards this, and you may have a chance, based on a good reason, to appeal. Those are great questions, though.
I will say a good reason to appeal is not, I read somewhere that your average financial aid package is X, Y, and Z, and I didn't get the average.
No, you need it, yeah. It has to be a good reason. But, let's say, for example, the average award is, 50,000, they come in at 30,000, and you have a reason. Your chances of getting it are much better because you kind of, the unspoken word is, I'm kind of in the know, I'm appealing here for this reason, and then the committee kind of knows, like, hey, we probably have a little bit of room, right? It's up to them. You always want to be gracious and respectful, but I think if you have a good reason, and you kind of know that you're not being outlandish, right? Because they've kind of lowballed you, then it makes sense.
And what would a good reason be?
Change in income.
Okay, those things, okay, that mean different things.
What I always say is that, in an appeal, we know that your students are wonderful, we admitted them. We want them on campus.
Tell me how great they are.
We know they're amazing. I agree with Lance's advice about the, sending in other offer letters from other universities. Personally, I want to see them, selfishly, because I want to see how we're doing against other competitors.
Fair.
But I also want to see, we spend many weeks crafting our award letter and refining it each year and making sure we get the right information out there. So I want to see, okay, well, what's LMU looking like? How's my physical award letter, the information I'm providing, stack up to LMU? Am I going to, is that going to be an appeal approval? No. But those things like, taking care of relatives, loss of job, loss of income, medical expenses, those are things that absolutely we'll look at. It's harder when we're looking at things related to kind of primary residence or an asset that you have that you didn't use, because we do see those every year. I sold my house 2 years ago and I have $400,000 sitting in the bank that's not really there. Well, but it is, and you haven't used it for what you wanted to use it for. If you set it aside to use it for something, why didn't you use it for that something in the last 3 years? And we're always looking for something that impacts the current financial situation, not the entire financial history of the family.
Right.
Because we're looking at 2 years prior income, what's happened that's changed in those 2 years? Anything that happened before that shows up on those taxes, and we know that information already.
And to a lesser extent, but we've definitely seen it. Competing schools, competing for top students, if they're rivals, they tend to be a little bit more aggressive. So that's always fun.
For the loans, are we supposed to pay back right away, or you can wait until you graduate and then pay back?
On the student side, loans are in deferment until the student graduates, and they have a grace period at the end. On the parent side, the loan technically goes into repayment as soon as the loan is fully dispersed. So you typically, in a semester program, you have a disbursement in the fall and disbursement in the spring. Payments would start 6 months after that. You have the option of putting it into forbearance, which means your interest is still going to accrue, and the federal government says you don't need to make payments on this, and they'll just keep pushing that out. Of course, what that means is you're paying interest on interest because it's going to capitalize at some point. On your private loans, most private loans right now, you can get better rates if you're making more than just an interest payment while in school, and most private loans are requiring at least an interest payment while you're in school, or a minimum payment. If it's in the student's name, typically they want to see something like a $50 payment each month to get that student involved in that payment process and to get them into that habit of this is what happens. But you can have things like lowering your interest rate if you're making full payment while you're in school. If you're doing auto deduction from your bank account, you can get a lower interest rate. Cosigner, you can get a lower interest rate. So really, when you're looking at those private loans, look at all of the options that are out there for you and see, if I select these different options, how low does my interest rate go?
What about the student loans for the federal? Does the interest rate accrue or no? Or they wait until they graduate for the student?
On the federal side, there's 2 different student loans. It's one program, but there's a subsidized and an unsubsidized loan. The unsubsidized loan, they both technically start accruing interest from the moment they're dispersed. The difference, though, is that for a portion of the loan, the federal government may say, we're going to forgive that interest. So that doesn't exist. It's still accruing interest, but it doesn't exist. And then once you get past your grace period, your interest is going to just start to accrue at that point. That unsubsidized one will always accrue interest. In your first year, it's $5,500 total that you can borrow, that the student can borrow. And that may be some combination of that subsidized and that unsubsidized portion. The subsidized portion is actually a need-based award. So you do have to have demonstrated financial need to get that subsidy. So your loan could be an entirely $5,500 unsubsidized loan that accrues interest. You don't have to pay that interest while you're in school, but it's going to accrue. I always suggest if you can, throw interest at it, throw that payment at it quarterly. It's not worth it to pay the $5 every month or whatever it's going to be, but do a quarterly payment just to keep that down if you can. If not, not a big deal. There's also no prepayment penalty on the federal loans. So if you take them out and then get to graduation, you haven't paid any interest on them, so there's really, other than the fee that you had to take out, the origination fee, which is 1% on the federal loan, on the student side, other than that 1%, there's no other fee or interest that's accruing at that point. You could, at graduation, write a check for your entire loan portfolio on the federal loan and pay it off, there's no penalty.
Yeah, so they're formally called the Stafford loans, now they're called direct loans. It's $5,500 for your first year, $5,500 for the second, $6,500 for your third, $7,500 for your fourth. So just to put it in perspective for loan amounts.
With regard to the private loans, how do you shop for them? I think you mentioned like Sally, SoFi. I mean, do you go to each individual site, or do you get a list of sites? Do you use a searching tool?
It's kind of school-based. So, for Chapman, what we do, we don't have a preferred lender list. There's certain federal regulations around, if we can actually recommend a lender to a student on the private side. But what we do is we maintain a list of private lenders who students have successfully borrowed with over the last 3 years. And so we have a tool on our website where it shows you those loans, and you can click on, I think it's 3 or 4 of them at the same time, and compare them. So you can see all the different interest rates that are available, and then you actually apply through the lender directly. There's a link that can apply. We have a secondary tool for students who are actually enrolled. So you could go to Chapman, Chapman.edu right now, search for private loan, look at that tool. It's called Elm Select. Most schools use something similar. It's not tied to Chapman other than the selection that's there. So it's not behind like an ID paywall or an ID portal or anything like that. You just do the comparison. The one that's a little more nuanced, we do offer for students. It's a pre-qualification process, and they can go in and put their information, and based on their current credit portfolio and what they're studying, how long they're going to be in school, it will blindly recommend, I think it's 3 lenders, based on what the algorithm says you're most likely to get approved for, and this is the best loan for you.
Which site is that?
That's just our website, yeah. That's just Chapman.edu.
And then collegefundingcoach.org under parents resources, you'll see same thing.
Okay, and then did you mention did you say Elm Select?
Elm Select, it's a tool that the schools have, and that's just part of our website. So you just go to chapman.edu, type in private loan, and you'll see the Elm Select tool there. Anyone can use it. You're not going to apply for the loan, but it's just a comparison tool that we offer.
Did you know, are any of the loans provided based upon value of primary residence rather than income?
No, that's not specifically out there. What lenders are looking at now with some of the changes in the federal loan policy, those private lenders, what they're looking at right now is instead of a straight credit score, looking at potential earnings. So as those programs kind of come online, you're going to see a little bit more of like major-based loan programs. They're not quite there yet. They're going to be rolling them out a lot for medical professions and graduate schools in the coming 6 months or so. And then after that, they're going to be looking at graduate or undergraduate programs as well and how to do that. But it's really going to be based on credit score.
And then just one other question here. separate from the loans. So understanding, based on what you guys have shared already, there's financial aid based on need. There are scholarships based on academics. There's scholarships based on athletics. But are you aware of either any school-based at Chapman or private leadership scholarships for students who have exhibited leadership at school, citizenship, involvement in the community?
There's scholarships out there for everything. You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised.
And where to find them?
There's apps you can go to. Again, I keep plugging the site, but it's got all the resources there. You can start to search for scholarships and different sites that list all of them. But it could be ethnicity, it could be need, it could be leadership, it could be sports, it could be anything. I mean, there's just there's a plethora out there for sure.
What's the website? What's your website?
collegefundingcoach.org.
Any suggestions over at the Chapman side?
Depending on kind of your financial situation, we just signed an agreement with the Marymount Foundation, Education Foundation, where we are offering for students in Southern California with a preference for graduating from a Catholic high school, eligible for a Pell Grant. There's some other criteria in there. We're offering a full ride scholarship. And the Marymount Foundation is kicking in a pretty significant chunk of funding for that. We have other programs similar to that aren't tied to some of those other things. So if you're Pell Grant eligible, receiving a merit scholarship from Chapman University, and going to commute, and you live in Orange County, you're also eligible for full tuition fees. So there's lots of different programs out there. The nice thing about us is that it's all one application. It's the FAFSA and the admission application. That's all we require. So we don't have 10 different applications for all these different programs.
The Pell Grant may be a challenging one to qualify for if you're living in Orange County.
Really quickly, before we move on, I know we're out of time, but I do want to respect that. I know I saw a hand back there, and then, so a couple more questions before we end, and to respect our speakers' time.
A real quick question, if you have multiple children, each with their own 529 plan, do you look at the entire family's 529 plans across all of the children, or just the one that's applying to the college at that time?
Just the one that's applying.
I was just wondering about work study. Is that typically part of it's automatically part of the financial aid package offer, and then you just have to then accept that?
Yeah, work study is there's two types of work study essentially. There's going to be your federal work study, which is a need-based financial aid offer. So you do have to qualify for that on demonstrated need. And then schools may have their own institutional work study that's not going to be based on financial need. And that can be either offered on the award letter or is simply the student looks for the job on campus where an office that has work study funds to spend that are not need-based.
So I think that just about wraps it up for now. Hopefully you all feel informed, hopefully you all feel empowered in some capacity now. But I really want to thank our speakers today. David, Lance, thank you so much for being here, for driving your experience.